Hello, welcome everybody.
Yes, welcome. How are you? So, I'm Tychelle. I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner and learning consultant. And I think this is the right? That's the
This
direction.
way, it's opposite of what you think. I'm Mel. I'm an author and a social ethicist.
So, welcome to Brave Space, where we'll be having some tough conversations around anti-oppression and communal healing. And today we're going to be talking about unlearning whiteness and white folks doing anti-racism work. What does that look like and how is it done? And we'll go through, we actually have a special guest, so I'm really, really excited for that. But wait a second. So we'll be having this conversation. Our guest will be with us. And then if we have enough time, because who knows how great this conversation will go, we'll go through some things that happened this week. And then an audience question. I do have one if we get to it. If not, we'll roll it to next week. But our special guest for today is Jolly Good Ginger. I know you've all seen him all over TikTok. And when we asked him for a bio, he gave us the shortest bio possible. And I love it. He was like, I'm from the mountains of North Carolina. I was raised with a Confederate flag in my front yard. And now he works to combat racism by seeking to educate white America, and we'll have to really talk about that, and what racism is and how we pass it along to our children. So if you can help us in welcoming our guest, Jolly Good Ginger.
Woo!
Hey!
Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Us too.
So we wanted to get into this conversation, and I really want to hear about you all's backgrounds, you know, as you're doing this work as white people. What does that look like? But more importantly, where do you come from? How do you do this work? And I'm going to, like last week when we had a guest, I'm going to take a little bit of a backseat this week and be, you know, lobbing some questions at our folks and engaging in the conversation that way. Not completely out of the conversation, but I really want to get to hear from you all how you do this work and how you unlearn whiteness. So Jolly, if you could tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you to this point in the work.
Yeah, sure. I mean, as you said, I am from the mountains of North Carolina. What's unique about, you know, I'm from Western North Carolina, and there's a lot of small towns in Western North Carolina. That's kind of how Western North Carolina is populated, small towns everywhere. And I was from one of those small towns. The mountain I grew up on shouldn't probably even be called a mountain. It was more like a hill. But it was Crowder's Mountain. And, you know, just a typical rural area, predominantly white. Everybody in my neighborhood's white. That's all I know is white people. Yes, there was a Confederate flag in my front yard. That's what I knew. That was life as I knew it, right? Racism was casual, you know. The N-word was casual. That was just, you know, it wasn't that you referred to a black person as an N-word when you're angry or, you know, want to make a point. That was just a descriptor, right? That's just how you referred to black people in general. And so that was, you know, kind of life for me. And it wasn't just racism. It was bigotry in general, right? Mm-hmm. I grew up in a place where, you know, the church I went to every Sunday and Wednesday was, you know, fire and brimstone, you know, if you're gay, lesbian, transsexual, transgender now, but back growing up, they always call it transsexual. They always call it. But you're going to hell. God don't approve of your life. You know, my mom and dad had divorced. My mom remarried to a black man, and I was told that God didn't approve of her marriage and that her children were bastards because of that. That's kind of the environment I grew up in. And it was more, I call it casual racism. You know, it was very casual racism and bigotry. And that's all I knew. That's what you grow up. That's what you see. That's what you know.
And Mel, how about you? Does your background and your upbringing match that, or how is it different from what Jolly has just shared with us?
I would say it's similar in the fact that I was definitely in a white bubble, not exposed to a lot of folks from other ways of life. I grew up in a farming town on the coast of California, pastor's family, and we were those quote unquote nice white people who didn't see color, more or less. And I guess the counterpoint to Jolly's experience of the overt racism, I would definitely characterize my upbringing as the covert racism, the colorblind, the separatistic kind of like some hush hush comments about other people, right? There were a lot of migrant farm workers in my town, very segregated along white and Latinx lines. So for us, it was it was just it was something we didn't have to address or think about it because we weren't the problem, more or less. But I did remember, still remember to this day, watching a white pastor in our church take aside one of the only black men in the whole church of like 2,000 people, and like very condescendingly explaining to him that, you know, we don't support Bill Clinton because he's a Democrat, and that's really bad. Like, you can't be a Democrat and be a Christian. And like singling out this only black guy to like talk down to him and like belittle him and tell him what to believe politically. And that guy like didn't really come around to our community anymore very much after that, right? But like not so seeing things like this, but not really having the language to understand why it felt the way it did or it worked the way it did, until I got to college and I had a Nigerian roommate named Peju. And she, I don't know if it's because I was saying colorblind, covert racist things, or I don't know what prompted her to do this, but she invited me to read the book Black Like Me with her and talk about it. And it was like super amazing that she decided to educate me. And I'm glad that I responded as like a, 19-year-old who didn't know much about the world, that like I actually read the book, right? So that was really one of my first initiations, is having someone walk through this with me and teach me, even though I didn't know this is what I needed to learn.
So would you say, Jolly, like, I know you talked about your mom getting remarried. So was that kind of like your initiation to being like, wait, was what I learned right? How did that work? You said your mom got remarried to a black man.
So I get asked that, right. I get asked that a lot. Like, what was your turning point? And I'm hesitant to say turning point, because it's deconstructing and unlearning racism is a journey and a process, and we must still be doing it. So there was no point. I don't like to talk about a point, but there was definitely some highlights along the way, right? And so the story there is my mom and dad divorced when I was 3 years old. My dad was already racist. My mom can tell you, my mom, for the most part, well, first of all, let's be clear. My dad married my mom when she was like 14. And my dad at the time was 19. I was born when my mom was 16 and my dad was 21. So, obviously my mom's very easily influenced, in that environment. So my mom can tell you of the times my dad did some pretty, outlandish stuff. There's a story she'll tell you about a time that her and my dad's friend, Simon, who I knew growing up too, and his wife, and then my dad were all they went to a store, and my dad saw two girls get out of a car and go into the store, two white ladies, and there was two black men in the car, and it was about 9:00 at night, and he wasn't happy about that. Wasn't happy that these black men were in town, or that they were with a white woman. And so Simon and my dad instructed my mom and the other lady to go beat up the girls and teach them a lesson. And then they went and beat up the dudes. And that was like, that's my dad. So anyway, they divorced when I was 3. And yes, my mom did remarry to a black man. And my dad was awarded custody of me. Now, I attribute that to a white lady married to a black man's not getting custody of her white child in the 80s, right? This is the early 80s. You're not getting your child. So my dad got custody of me. And from that point, I didn't see my mom. Now, obviously, my dad had a concerted effort to keep me away from her. And my dad pretty much, two things. Number one, my dad's racism. Right, there's a trope that says black men are out to steal white women. That's a thing. That's a belief. That's part of the stereotype that is literally an implicit bias that's built into racism. Absolutely. So now, my dad's wife really did marry a black man. What do you have? You have all my dad's friends, everybody around the mountain saying, "Dude, She left you for a black man. Now let's be clear, they weren't saying black man there.
Right. I was
They
like, that's a nice version of what they said.
correct.
Yeah.
But that's what that was the conversation. They left you for a black man. And so now my dad's racism, if you can turn the burner up, right? It's peaking. And then on the flip side of that, he's telling me, lots of bad things about my mom. She's a horrible person. She's the devil on earth. Her marriage is not ordained by God. God doesn't approve of interracial marriages. That's not a thing. Therefore, at this time, she had a couple children with her second husband. Therefore, her children are bastards, right? And so this is what I'm being taught, and I believe that. Why would I? I mean, this is my dad. I don't question him. When I was 10 years old, my mom got visitation rights. She went to court, and I remember specifically my dad saying, "Hey, you're going to miss school next Wednesday. I'll just make a day up, but you're going to miss school because we're going to court." And I was like, "Well, I don't want to see her." Obviously, I didn't want to see her. I hated her.
Right.
And went to court. Obviously, I didn't get a say in anything, and she was awarded visitation rights. And so I was pissed, man. I was mad. I didn't want to see her. And then the next Saturday came along, was the first visitation, and I had set in my mind, I'll make sure this woman never picks me up again after today. And so what she decided to do was to take me to a museum, a local museum that everybody knew about, as kind of a neutral ground. Let's not go straight to my house. Let's go to a neutral ground, which is smart of her. And I was just rude the whole way. So from the time she picked me up to the time we got to the museum, I told her everything. You're an N-word lover. All your children are N-words. God don't even approve of you and your bastard children.
Regurgitating all that things your dad put.
Oh, 100%. And she was saying, like, that's your brothers and sisters you're talking about. And I would say, those little N-words aren't my brothers and sisters. That's what I was saying verbatim. I remember this car ride. It was a very traumatic experience for me. It was almost like I felt like I was being kidnapped. I don't want to be with this woman because I have been taught to hate this woman. So anyway, she tolerated me for like how many 2 hours, 3 hours at the museum, and then took me back. And I was not nice the whole time. So I told my dad, I said, listen, because she had visitation every other Saturday. I said, in 2 weeks, time, 10 o'clock, whatever time, she won't be there. Don't worry about that. These visitations over, I assure you that. 2 weeks come along, she pulled up. And I couldn't fucking believe it. I said, she's picking me. Oh my God. I couldn't believe it. So she picked me up, and this time I went to her house. And she lives in an all-black neighborhood. She's literally the only white person in this neighborhood, and this is literally nothing I've ever been in my life. I'm from an all-white neighborhood. This is antithetical to everything I understand in life. So I go in, I sit on the couch, and I'm not interested in talking to anybody, whatever. And she's like, I want you to meet your brothers and sisters. And I'm like, I'm against this. But I don't say anything because I really don't have much control of the situation. My brothers and sisters come out at the time. There was 3 brothers and sisters at the time. And they were so nice to me. Hey, Russell, I was like, why do they want to see me for? Well, as it turns out, my mom had told them lots of nice things about me. This is your older brother, this, that, this. And every part of me wanted to be an asshole. I wanted to tell them how I feel about everything. Now, granted, they're younger than me, and I'm only 10, okay? So they're not old, and they're just excited that, my brother's showing me his Ninja Turtle, and, and my sister's showing me her Barbie doll, and I'm like, I can't be mean to him. Could not bring it in my heart to be mean to him. So they were there, and I was there. I can't say I was kind. They were kind. I wasn't. And then 2 weeks later, she picks me back up, and then this cycle starts, and I start developing a relationship with my brothers and sisters. And then they had a basketball goal, and I fucking love basketball. So I grow up, basketball is like my thing. I love basketball. And so I found out that a basketball goal, like 2 houses down, we go on there. They're yeah, you can play ball with us. Oh, great. Start playing ball, and then I get to know the other kids, not really the adults, but the kids in the neighborhood. And it just starts dawning on me, like, this is chill. This is cool. This is not, however, what my dad told me is happening in the bad neighborhood. This is not what my dad told me is happening in over there, right? This is how racism is taught. It's taught by Or you're going where? Second Street? Be careful over there. That's the bad
Fear.
neighborhood. No,
Yeah,
that's just
fear.
that's just the black neighborhood, and it's titled bad, right? So now I reached a point. I'm probably at the time 11, and I have to come. I'm at this crossroads where I either choose what I see in front of my eyes, the reality in the bad neighborhood, or I believe what my dad's been telling me my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
As an 11-year-old child, I chose reality. I chose what's in front of my eyes. And I began this process of, quite frankly, a personal identity crisis. Not only am I prepubescent, right? Not only am I hitting puberty anyway, and life as a whole is a crisis. Now
Mm-hmm.
I've got this, you know, literally we're talking about whiteness tonight. What was my? I didn't understand what being white was anymore. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
understand what being black was anymore, and I couldn't talk to my mom about it. I don't have that kind of relationship with her. I've known her all of a year, and I just stopped hating her. I not can't talk to my dad about it. Hey, dad, man, black people are not so bad. Let's have that fucking conversation. Not going to happen. So now I'm an 11-year-old child, zero adult guidance, trying to navigate a very nuanced, complex conversation of me and identity and race in America. So I started just, using what resources I had, books and this and that, and I read Dr. King's book, and I read Malcolm X, the biography on Malcolm X. I read speeches. I used to like to read. I got a lot of joy out of reading speeches. In my head, I would imagine the speech happening, and I'd read them, and I enjoyed it. And things just started speaking to me, and I started realizing, like, wow, this is literally a different experience than my America. I'll never forget one of the most eye-opening moments of my life was I was watching an old interview of Malcolm X on the TV, and he'd really just hit the national spotlight. Like Malcolm had just become, national a national spotlight, and the guy on the TV was saying, "What's your last name?" It's not X. What's your last name? And the guy and Malcolm X, I don't know my last name. That's why it's X, because we don't know. I've never had a family name. My family name was taken from me and assigned to my great grandparents from the slave master. And what you have to understand, as me being a good old boy from the mountains, okay, me being a good old southern white boy, my family name was taught to me as everything.
Yep.
Whatever you do, uphold your family name. Whatever you do, make your family name proud. Whatever you do, this generation has to be better than the last generation for the family name. That's what I knew. I had this had been beaten to me since I was a child. Literally, an important value of being white where I'm from. I'm sorry, being where I'm from, but being white is also true. But it was just your family name was everything. And then I'm hearing Malcolm say, I don't have a family name. I still remember. I had this epiphany.
Mm.
Like, holy, this is seriously. This is two Americas. It's not a joke. This is reality. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's not. Nobody's pulling the race card. This is fucking real. And his experience and my experience are not the same. And that almost lit it's like I went from studying and learning to being pissed off. Then I was mad. Like, how dare you tell me to uphold my family name and then strip his family of his family name? What the fuck kind of bullshit is that? That's hypocrisy, and I'm mad. And so
Yeah.
then I really dive in, and I started talking to some. I would talk to other members inside the community where my mom lived. Not so much my mom again. I wasn't going to my mom for guidance. And I would talk to like these just older folk, older black folk, and man, they would just spit wisdom, and it's like, damn, that's deep. And I would listen, and I just started, and I would get pissed off. By the time I was 15, I was so pissed off. I told my dad. Well, what happened was my dad's second wife. I don't call her my stepmom. She treated me like shit. Fuck her. But my dad's second wife. We're driving down the road by the store, by the grocery store, and she was telling a story about a black person, and she said that N word, and I said, "Don't say that in front of me no more." She said, "What? Say what?" She didn't even know she said it, right? I said the N word. Don't say that in front of me no more. I don't want you to say it no more in front of me. She goes, "Who the fuck are you to tell me what I can say in my car?" I said, "Then park the car. Let me out. Get me out of the car right now." So she took me at my word, called my bluff as it were, pulled over, and I got the fuck out. And she took off, and I started walking. She got home. My dad's, where the hell's my son? And she's like, well, I dropped a little smart ass off. He could walk home. So my dad came and picked me up. How's your problem? I said, Dad, I don't want nobody to say that word in front of me no more. And he goes off, you're not going to tell me what the hell I'm going to say in my house. And you know what I mean? And me and my dad got into a physical fight. I lost by a lot, right? This was not like me. This was not my coming out, and this is not my moment. I lost, but I didn't lose. Mentally, I fucking won, because now people knew where I stood on it. You know what I mean?
You stood up to him. Yeah.
Yeah. And I stood up to the idea. I stood up to, and he used it. He would purposely use it after that, stronger, emphasize it, make sure, motherfucker, you're in my house. But I didn't care. And so from that was that, I guess that was really my coming of age, in terms of choosing reality over tradition, right? Choosing reality over what I've been taught. And for me, ever since then, it's been a journey. I know people watching don't know, but we were talking about an email that somebody sent you even before I came on your show, and they said, he started this last year. No. I've been doing this a really, really long time. And
I want to get into that too. I want to ask Mel, was your journey, did yours mirror that in any way? Like when you found out, like, this is not what I knew, this is not what I experienced, or this book is very, like when you said you read Black Like Me, that book, or Black Like Me, because I think there's also a White Like Me by Tim Wise as well. But when you read that, like, what kind of resonated with you? What was like, wait, that's not what I see? Like, what kind of stood out to you?
It wasn't a single epiphany moment. I can't. Thank you so much for sharing your story, because mine was such a slower process, because I was in such a white bubble for such a long time. Even my university was like 94% white, so I came at it really, I think, full throttle in grad school, studying under a queer Black feminist pastor, learning about the Black church and learning about all these ideas intellectually, but not having the same access to Black communities, and not wanting to force myself into those communities as well, right? Like, unless you're invited in and you have a reason to be there, like as a white person, you don't want to just like walk in and be like, hey, you are all my friends now, I'm going to tokenize you, and
Which you would be surprised to know that I get asked, like, people, I've had white people ask me, how do I make Black friends? And I'm like, I don't know. I was like, go do regular stuff.
How do you make regular friends, dummy? Right.
Well, we live in a segregated country, so like to such an incredible degree, still to this day. So, I definitely appreciate your story, Jolly, because it's like a lot of white people don't have access to that. I think until a lot of us, and this was the case for me, until I had a Black person in my life who's willing to educate me, or until you start seeing that some of these myths you were taught to believe, these hateful, bigoted myths, aren't true and are so stupid and divisive for so many reasons. I think it's almost impossible for white folks to see it.
I mean, I think it's still that same, but what the points that I'm seeing for the both of you is that access to what you weren't around, what you were kept away from, what you didn't see, right?
Exposure.
So all of that, what becomes access, which is so funny to me, and I'm just mirroring that with, because me and my friend, one of my other friends, we talk about this in seed training, which is windows and mirrors, things that reflect your experience and things that are different. And one of the windows for me is that I grew up like very much like Jolly in a very Black neighborhood, but I was Black inner city neighborhood. And every inner city Black neighborhood has like one white guy who everybody's cool with, and they call him Black whatever or white whatever. Like, oh, that's White Mike. Oh, that's Black Mike. That kind of thing. And I grew up in Black high schools, Black middle schools, Black elementary schools, but we always knew white people existed. We always knew that white people, like, we knew how to act around people. So it's funny that you both say that, because what it mirrors for me is me going through college and having to learn about my own people, reading some of the books that you talked about, Mel, or some of the, Black feminist thought books, reading Malcolm X, reading Dr. King. Like, everybody knows about when you go to a Black elementary school, we always get the big six in school. It's Black History Month. Let's read those same big six, people, Rosa Parks, without learning about Claudette Colvin, who came before Rosa Parks, that kind of stuff. So I always knew that, but it wasn't until I was in college that I was like, wait a minute. something ain't right. So it's funny that even, and I think this is something that oh god, I can't remember her name. Jane Elliott said that we all, if you were educated in the American education system,
You were taught
racism
racism.
is part of it, right?
Yeah.
It's a part
That's
of it.
right.
It's indoctrinated, and then it's for so many. This is why people who are arguing that CRT is happening in elementary schools, even though it's not, and it's not happening until college,
Right.
because it's happening in college, right? So that to me is such an interesting thing. But one of the things I want to ask you all is, like, when you think about this, what like some of the mind shifts, and specifically, I know Jolly, you talked about this a little bit, but like, how did some of your relationships change with the people around you, like both very white relationships, maybe family or friends, or black people that you started to know? How did that really shift for you all? And I'll throw it to Mel first, and then Jolly, you can follow up with how that shifted for you.
Sure.
Yeah, so for me, I think it was this implicit fear. I think there are two things. I think colorblindness for a lot of folks, it really turns into diversity erasure. Like, and I've actually been told this by white people in my life, like, let's just not talk about it. Like, let's just everyone act normal, without really unpacking that normal to them means white. You want everyone to be white. And if they're too ethnic or too spicy for you or whatever like,
You know,
am I
y'all
allowed
like
to say,
spicy food.
am I allowed to say spicy? I don't know.
But that's the thing.
It's not questioning that white normativity where the white people are allowed to remain in the center and be anonymous. That, I think, was waking up to that and understanding that was really powerful. And the second thing, I can't remember my train of thought, so I'll kick it to Jolly and then we'll come back to me.
No, so I agree with you in terms of white is normal, right? That's what we're taught. That's the standard. That's American white supremacy. In August, I gave a speech in Kenosha. I was very honored to be welcomed to be a guest speaker there. And in my speech, I even said just that. I said, people say, let's not talk about race, because in white America, if you don't talk about race, it doesn't exist, right? So it is true. Here's the thing. I often say this. I say it as a shock factor to get people's attention, but I say I love racists. I love them. I love racists. What? Let me tell you why. And you love racists too. Let me tell you why. Your mama's a racist, your daddy's a racist, your uncles are racist, your aunts are racist, your cousins are racist, and you love them. See, I was taught racism by a man that I love. I was taught racism by a man who, when I scraped my knee, would hug me and say, it's okay, and here's a Band-Aid. I was taught racism by a man who took me trick-or-treating. Sorry. So I was taught racism. My dad, it's hard to talk about that, but I was taught racism by my parents, and when you're taught something by somebody you love, you don't see the bad in that something, right? Because you got to understand, racists are good people. What? Yes. Because racism, we are people. People need to understand this is not a two-dimensional topic, and we are not two-dimensional people. We're not drawn on paper. We are complex, nuanced beings. A racist still loves their family, still wants to do good and contribute to society and fight for their country, as it were, and has a set of morals and values and ethics. But their racism is still inherent in them, and that is deadly, and that is toxic, and that kills people, right? So we have to separate the character trait. We got to separate the toxic reality of this existence from the person. White people hate being called racist worse than actual racism, because a white person has never experienced racism. A white person may have prejudiced instances, but they never experienced racism. Whereas every fucking time you go somewhere, you're going to be reminded that you're, whatever. In this case, you're black. Everywhere you go, you're going to be reminded you're black. A white person not going to be reminded they're white every fucking where they go. Maybe isolated incidents. But they get called racist a lot. And I tell people this. How many people have called you a murderer last week? How many people called you a thief last week? Well, none. Nobody. You know why? You weren't doing anything to make somebody think you're a fucking murderer. So if everybody's calling you a racist, why? Right? So we got to separate the fact that my dad, if you ask anybody about my dad around the mountain, he was actually well known in the mountain for lots of different reasons. If you ask anybody in the community, if you ask other family members of mine, literally great, upstanding man. Literally, he was the go-to guy. Call him 2 o'clock in the morning. He's there. He's got your back. If we're driving on the road and somebody's broken down the side of the road, he's pulling over. We're fixing their car, no matter who they are, and no matter how long it takes us. We'll spend money to buy whatever part they need. One time on my Instagram, I posted a bunch of pictures of my dad, and people were like, "Whoa, I've heard a lot of stories about your dad, and that's not what I expected him to look like, and that's why I did it." Because none of the pictures he was wearing a Klan hood, right? So you got to understand, these are still people,
right,
with complex relationships with other people, and they literally don't understand racism. Now, you hear me say all that and say, "Oh, here's a white guy making a bunch of excuses for racism," then you haven't watched my content, right? So I understand those complexities, but I believe in no safe spaces for racists because I really feel like that's how you defeat it. You smoke it out. So how did my relationship change? I don't cut anybody off. I don't stop relationshiping with anybody because then who's going to tell them? Then who's going to call them out? Then who's going to educate them if not me, right? So I maintain my relationships the best I can until there is lots of people have cut me off throughout the years. I've shed tears over that because family is an important thing, and there's been a lot of studies done that people with complex family structures actually live longer and they're healthier, and that's a real thing. And so when I look back, like, what is my family now? It's a very small circle of people, very small, and that can be depressing at times because people have cut me off because I don't let anybody slide on shit. I don't let them slide. They make a joke. I'm just joking. Okay, let's talk about joking, bro. Let's talk about where joking leads, bro. Let's talk about where that comes from.
You become that guy at every Thanksgiving.
Correct.
And I tell people, the thing is, I tell people that same thing. So I remember being in grad school, and we were, we wanted to have these rounds. This is when Obama was president, and everybody was like, "Now race is a conversation we should be having." And we were talking, and somebody was like, "Well, we need to be having these conversations, but who do I have them with?" And I was like, "Listen," they're like, "How can I help?" Right? White people get into this work, and we'll talk a little bit about that. How can I help? And I said, if you're not talking to the people around you, you can't help me.
That's right.
Because you love them. So how are you going to talk to people you don't love?
Yeah.
Right? If you are scared to sit at your Thanksgiving table with your family and have these conversations, then I know that it's only going to be out there. It's never going to be in here. It's never going to be around you. And and I always tell people, and I'm curious to hear about how it's really impacted you all, because I always tell people the hardest part of this work is looking in the mirror. Like,
here's
people really think it's not, but it really is.
100%. Let me say two things. I'm glad you opened that door because this is something I love fucking talking about. I talk about it a lot. So what I see with white people a lot is exactly what you just said. Oh man, I couldn't imagine being black in America. I just, how can I help? What can I do? Okay, I got an answer for you. Save your empathy. Because you're right. You can't imagine what it's like to be black in America. You can't. It's fucking impossible. There's nothing you can do to be black in America. You're white. So save your empathy and fix your cousins. That's the message, right?
Yep.
If you're not at home, and I don't mean home as if like maybe you don't live at home with your family, that's fine. If you're not, especially these days, social media makes the world real small. We're all, your family's following you on Facebook. If you're watching your auntie post some racist shit, call her out.
Yeah.
Right there. Right. Boom. Let's go.
Yep.
Let's have a conversation. Let me explain it. So if you see her, posting some bigoted, some transphobic, it's got to be called out. If you go to the gym and you want to become, stronger, better, bigger, how do you do that? You got to push yourself past your comfort zone and get to that uncomfortable place where you grow. Same thing's true with this, right? So we have to push people into uncomfortable places and have uncomfortable conversations. So if you're not ready to save your empathy and fix your cousins, you're not ready to help anybody. You're still growing. And let me say this. I hear a lot of people say I was raised around racists. Oh man, I know a lot of racists growing up. I don't hear enough people say I was raised by racists. You know why? Because of what I just said earlier. Well, my mom and dad aren't bad people. I love them. They weren't racist. No. Listen. If you go and cast a net out in the ocean and catch a school of fish, you pull them out, all the fish look alike. They stay together as a school. If you was raised around racists, you were the fucking beacon of hope in the neighborhood and you were out there every weekend saying, "Hey, everybody stop being racist, man. We're not racist around here." Or you were racist, buddy. Okay, your mom and dad was in the same neighborhood as racist. You were in the same school as racist. You were raised around them because you were them, and that's okay. White people have to be okay with understanding. White people think that being a racist or that being accepting racism or accepting racist, I have racist ideas or racist. I've now marked myself as a bad person.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
I mean,
just
it's not
watched a
okay to
video.
be racist, but I see what you're saying. Like, it's it's not okay
No,
to
it's
be
not
racist,
okay to
right?
be racist.
But it's okay to
It's okay to
understand that
admit it.
you are. It's okay to admit it because
Correct.
that's the first step in recovery. Yeah, the word
Of
that is
anything.
coming to mind of anything. Yeah, the word that's coming to mind in as like a kind of unifying theme in these stories is the word betrayal. Like the betrayal of learning that this person you look up to is holding these horrible views, or that the person, like in my case, the community that I was raised in, the church I was raised in, had this absolute silence and this absolute complicity and just checked out, and would have this like once a year like racial reconciliation service where they would like get together with people of color and like pray and cry and like feel better, and that was fighting racism. But it was so shallow and so hollow, and so it's almost, I would say, more harmful, because you just think you can magically fix racism by saying some
But
magic
that's the
words.
thing. You're fixing racism out there and not in here.
In here,
and, right,
exactly.
And right. It's not your thinking. And this is what I tell people all the time, because what you talked about, Jolly, is what Robin DiAngelo calls in her book. Before her book even became a good book, she wrote an article called The Good Bad Binary. And white people see racists as people in KKK hoods. They don't see it as them. They don't see it as regular. They don't see it. Nobody. It's like until 2020, nobody even saw it in our education system.
I'm going to tell you something that you just said that's on the money. And this is something I've said 1,000 times over, and it's something I believe in. White people see racism as a light switch, okay? When you're a racist, the light switch is on. It's up. When you're not a racist, the light switch is off. So, light switch is on. How do I turn it off? Well, I talk to a black person. I have a black friend. It's a very two-dimensional concept. Either you're racist or you're not. There is no in between. And what is up? What is on? It's what you just said. It's riding around on a horse, burning crosses with a Klan hood on. It's saying the N-word in the middle of the town square. It's saying, I hate all black people. I got a cousin, real life story. I got a cousin who's racist as shit, but he'll tell you he's not. I'm not racist. If he heard me say this right now, he would want to fight me. He would want to physically fight me for saying he's a racist. How fucking dare I? Now, in his defense, not me defending him, the way he defends himself, I'm not a racist. You understand? In high school, I was on the football team, and there was white kids and black kids on the football team, and we had to work together to win games. I'm not racist, bro. Listen to me. If you got to go 25 years ago in your past to a time when y'all played a sport together as your defense, you racist, bro.
But then what you brought up actually brings up another point that I talk about with people, is that white people, but even the concept of how white people assume that black people's proximity to them makes them less racist, but then also that's a good thing for the black people. Not as if I dug into Jamal's past or I learned that Jamal was facing a lot of racism and I wanted to help him do something about it, but because Jamal is near me, he's a good black person and I'm a good white person, and only Jamal, not Jamal's cousins, brothers, sisters, just Jamal, because I know him. And it's this thing that white people when we say white, oftentimes I always tell people that this is white supremacy, because white people not arguing against racism and things that happen in this manner are, it's hurting white people too, because they don't even realize that it's a part of the problem as well, that they're like trying to reach out this toxic perfectionism, which is why you can't say I have racist thoughts or actions or bias or prejudice, because if you do, you're now a bad person. White supremacy,
stigmatic.
Right, it has made you a bad person. You can't be you have to let that go, because you're never progress of perfect is the enemy of progress. Like, you are not going to be perfect in doing this work. You're not going to be perfect in being a white person. Like, there are no perfect white people, right? I'll tell you that I didn't even know that white people went to church. I grew up in an all-black neighborhood, and somebody said, yeah, when I was like 20-something, and somebody said, yeah, well, when my family goes to church on Sundays, I said, white people go to church? And I was like the same church that I go to church? And they were like, yeah, and it's because I never saw a white person in church.
Wow.
And if you watch white TV shows, there's never, Friends doesn't have an episode where they all went to church. Like, that's not a thing. But every black TV show got an episode where they're coming from church.
Yeah.
So I never knew that was a thing. So it's so interesting to me that white people get so hung up on that they're like, I'm not racist. I can't be racist. And what you said, Jolly, is also very indicative, because it is pointing to that one black person that was near you somewhere in the past. And Eduardo Bonilla Silva, who writes a book called Racism Without Racist, and he talks about this. So he interviews a string of white people and he asks them these questions, and they say, oh, I have black friends. And it's like my neighbor down the street who I saw 2 weeks ago take out his trash, and we both went to each other. And that's the extent of their relationships. Because if you were in relationship with people, but I mean, I can't even say that
because
for sure, because I had a friend
if I'm
say
not
to me,
actively trying to kill my neighbor, then what the hell?
right,
I got a black
exactly.
man.
The bar is so low.
I had
Correct.
a white person say to me once, I have black friends and they never told me any of these things were happening. And I said, you need to go back to all of your black friends, all of them, because I feel like when you say my black friends, it's probably like one or two. Ask them why they never told you, and be ready to hear that answer. Because if they really are your friends, you can ask them that, and they're either going to tell you, I didn't want to burden you, because they thought it was going to be a burden to you, or they weren't your friends to begin with. So you may not even ask them. But I've had that happen. So I just think that it is one of those issues. So one of the things I really want to talk about in this unlearning whiteness journey, or this journey
Can I add something before you switch from that topic? Just because I wanted to add on to what you just said, because it's on the money. Growing up in white America, and every white person in America has heard this. Anybody who says they haven't heard this is lying to you. But every white community has this concept built into it, and there's a difference between a black man and beep the N-word. This is literally just a fabric. This is a token. This is a bullet point of what is white America, and that's what it is. White people. I'm not racist. I love anybody who works hard and supports their family and follows the law, and they say these things. I'll support them. So by implication, what the problem with that ideology is, a black man's guilty until proven innocent. You're an N-word until you prove to me that you fit my criteria, like Mel said earlier, which is spot on the money. You fit my criteria of what is a good person. Well, what is a good person is how close to you how close are you to my whiteness? How close are you to making me feel comfortable as a white man? Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
So I want to ask you both. So before we, this is such a good conversation. Let's define whiteness for viewers, because we're talking about unlearning whiteness. Obviously, it's an oxymoron that you can totally unlearn whiteness. Like Jolly and I cannot stop being white, obviously. Okay, right. So when we talk about unlearning whiteness, what do we mean by that?
I personally equate whiteness as the blanket that covers white supremacy, right? So without whiteness, you can't have white supremacy because it'll be exposed. And I think that whiteness is the systemic norm that we've assigned to society, right? So you can apply that to so many things. Like, so if you let's talk about the workplace and hair, because how common is that a conversation is how your hair looks in the workplace. What's the norm? White people, right?
You're still allowed to legally discriminate against black people in some states for certain hairstyles. Correct. In the military, it was the same thing in the military. I was in the Army for 13 years. Same thing. Let's talk about what's normal.
Etiquette, like how loud you can be.
Right. I was going to say loud music. How loud you can play your music. Let's talk about. There's every aspect of what is unacceptable is what is anti-normal, what is normal, white. And that's how I see whiteness. I say all the time, I say white people this and white people that, and then the people in my comment section, you're white, right? That was your intellectual contribution to this conversation. That was it. That was what you obviously.
I get that one so much too.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Did you know you're white? Did you know?
I'll go into the little bit of the academic background of it. So, and we talked a little bit about this last week about interracial dating, right? So the longest running racial law is miscegenation, 1664 to 1964, where black people couldn't marry white people, right? But the thing that I say that links to this is that they had to come up with the term. They had to create the term white, because if there are European settlers, but from Spain, from Portugal, from Ireland, from Italy, What do we call all of them, right? So when we talk about what is whiteness, they had to come up with a term that linked all of these people together to, because whiteness is created for supremacy, right?
Correct.
It is the property owning class. And because you owned women, because women were property as well, for women, if a woman whose father passed down property to her married a black man, then that property became his. And to stop that from happening, and then to stop people from getting legislative votes and things like that, they created the term white after Bacon's Rebellion. So this is where the term, so when we're talking about whiteness and white people, the reason that white people have to call them or choose to and get to be a part of whiteness now is because white is America, right?
Correct.
That's why you're right. It is America. But you all have a past that you could probably very easily, as Jolly was talking about a little bit earlier, trace your name back to. My last name comes from a slave owner, right? So, but your last name comes from a place. And I can't, no matter how much ancestry DNA I do, because I've done it, it will link me to the west of Africa, literally. All up and down. So so whiteness is a slave, I'm sorry, not a slave. It is an owning class made for supremacy specifically. That is not encompassing white people. That's not encompassing the people of today, but it has become the norm. It is, as Jolly said, that net over everything, right? Everything that is normal is white. So when people say things like, well, America's a melting pot. Well, yeah, we made white soup. So if everything comes together, it's going to make white soup. That's how we have to act. That's how we have to be. And when we talk, as he talked about with norms in the workplace, professionalism. I had a coworker, and she's I know I saw her make a comment earlier that somebody said I had a manager who only wore black clothing every single day. And my coworker would wear bright colors. Sometimes she wear African print garb. And she said, oh, she looks very tacky and it's unprofessional. How about the fact that you come into every meeting and don't speak to anybody is unprofessional? But she called her unprofessional because she wore bright colors. Mm-hmm. But that's a part of our heritage. And even though they tried to beat all of those things out of African slaves, some of that got passed down to us. So this is this thing about whiteness, that it has a standard, or it becomes the standard for which everything is measured by. Everything.
And now let's extrapolate from that. I do this all the time. Let's do an extrapolation exercise. So now that we understand, and we've had a conversation that white is the norm. Mm-hmm. What's the number one thing every human being alive hates more than anything? Let's think about this. Let's think about what people just fucking hate doing. Like, so when you have a meeting at work and they say, hey, listen, guys, we're making some changes. As soon as they say that, what do people do? Oh, God, what are the changes, right? Or this change is the hardest thing for people to do. Change is not welcome. People are comfortable in what? People are comfortable in their little groove spot, right? When we talk about defeating white supremacy, you must do it by deconstructing whiteness. So when I say that whiteness is the norm in America, in order for us to deconstruct, we have to now say, let's extrapolate past this. How do we go from this being the normal to white supremacy being dead? It requires change from white America and nobody else. It requires change from white America. We're asking white America to change and nobody else. So now what are they going to do? They're going to stomp their feet and say, no, why do I got to change? Why do I got to give in to them? And this is where literally everything is that simple. It's that simple. And it's that childish of a debate. The true debate, the true conversation that people don't want to have, and I mean, I say people, I'm talking about white America. The true conversation that white America doesn't want to have is they don't want to welcome change. The people that kind of make their way on this side of the fence, and we call it woke or whatever the hell word you want to call it now, those are the people that are accepting of the change. But the people that I don't want to change, listen, whiteness is the norm. And if we're going to defeat white supremacy, white America has to change. And it's not, and it's what it's the same thing. I used to run several car dealerships and everything. And every time we would change something, I would always tell people, listen, guys, it's not going to be as bad as you think it is. I promise you, we're going to make sure everybody still gets paid the same.
You've been a supervisor, you've had to try to cajole change.
Yeah, right. We're gonna make sure everybody gets paid the same. Your pay plans are staying the same. We're just moving the used cars from this side of the lot, that side. I promise, guys, it ain't gonna be that bad. Okay, and so people hate change. And once we understand that white is the norm, then the uncomfortable truth is, to make white supremacy go away, white people have to change.
I love your analogy of whiteness as the blanket that covers white supremacy. Because you ever been in a nap and you've been all cozy under a warm, toasty blanket, and then someone rips the blanket off you and it's freezing? Like that jarring feeling of like, no, where'd my comfort go? But a lot of us white folks, and myself included, we hide under that blanket. We don't see the carnage and the death and suffering that's happening outside the blanket. We're just like, we just care about ourselves.
This is why white people really didn't know, and some will forget and then have to be taught again that racism happened before 2020, because everybody's talking about 2020 as the breaking, everybody. But one of my questions then to you all is, what thrusted you into putting yourself in this work, and how does that work for, like, what does it mean to you, and how does it work for you? I want to get into that a little bit, and then I want to talk about some of the things that may be a little sticky for you all. Like, what are some of the things that you constantly have to work on? But what made you want to do anti-racism work?
So let me jump in, and I'd love to see what you have to say, John.
Go ahead.
So for me, it was learning about colonization in particular, and not understanding, in my uneducated state, not understanding how, my ancestors came over from Ireland during the potato famine. Poor white folks, right? Uneducated, low class white folks. Well, how can I be the problem? I say I love everybody. Not understanding that the minute my ancestors stepped foot on this continent, and Irish people started being, folded into whiteness, I reap the benefits of colonization all those hundreds of years ago. I reap the benefits. I reap all the privileges of being considered white by the color of my skin, right? So if that's true, there's no such thing as being neutral in this fight. There's no such thing. You can't, being silent is staying under the blanket. You're either under the blanket or you're outside of the blanket. You don't get to not have a relationship to the blanket. You're either in or out. So pick your side, and you're going to get called a race traitor. I've been called a race traitor. I know you have, Jolly. I've seen that. I've seen it happen. And again, this betrayal thing, like, when you wake up and you realize that that people that taught you and loved you and cultivated your mind and your heart and your soul and your spirit, like, betrayed you and betrayed our country when it came to this, you have to stand up to that. You have to betray that betrayal. You have to choose to betray that betrayal and step up to it, or you are part of it. Like, you don't. I mean, it just became very clear that, like, there's no neutral in this work. So it just kind of go for it.
I'll be honest with you. For me, anti-racism work is personal, very personal, extremely personal. I take it personal, and I'll be honest with you. For as long as I've been doing, I was doing anti-racism work before it was called anti-racism work. And I'm not saying this in a bad way. It's just, I was just doing the work, like, because it was personal. It was personal. And I never, ever thought, literally never, I never thought I'm doing this to help the Black community. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just didn't, that's not what I saw, what I was doing. I truly felt like that I came from the castle of white supremacy. I truly felt like I came from the ground zero of racism, and I've seen it, and I know what it looks like, and I know what it smells like, and I know what it acts like, and I know what it talks like when the doors are closed, and I know how two-faced it is. It's so two-faced. Literally, it's slimy and green, and it's grimy. It's gross. I've seen it up close and personal. I've loved it. I've hugged it. I've been hugged by it. And when I realized what it was, that's fucking personal to me. And it's been my life's mission to fucking dismantle that. People say to me all the time, it's ignorant shit. Well, what are you doing to help the Black community? Listen, I'm a strong fucking advocate of stay in your lane. I'm not Black. I don't know the problems in the Black community. Can a Black person tell me? Sure. They're also not a monolith. You can't say the Black community is one big monolith. So, like, let's stop these superfluous, just useless conversations and just understand white people need to understand they've heard what white people say behind closed doors. They've heard how white people act. They've watched white people do racist things and say racist things. And then you turn around and say racism doesn't exist. That's personal to me. It pisses me off. It angers me. And I want to be the Trojan horse that just walks right in and blows your whole fucking house of cards down. That's personal to me. It's really super fucking personal to me because I know it exists. You cannot. It angers me when people say, "Well, 1964, the civil rights." Shut the fuck up. Racism exists. I was taught how to be them. That's how they multiply them. That's fucking who. Literally, toxic traditions and implicit biases. They're all right here. I watched it, so it's very personal to me. Extremely personal.
That makes so much sense to me, and I want to tag on to one of the things that you said, and we were having that conversation about the email that we got earlier, and some of the things that you have experienced. I've joined one of your lives before where somebody wanted to talk about the black community and helping the black community. That was
Exactly.
I don't want to give those people any shout outs because
Right.
but people always want to talk about that's the deflection. Let's talk about the black community. Let's talk about black
Right.
and black crime. Let's talk about all of those things, right? But one of the things I wanted to tag on that you said was really being able to stay like you can't do this work for black people because, and as we know, and we are all on TikTok, probably me because if it takes more than 30 seconds to make a video, I'm done. So that's
man.
my right. So right. So that is why my following stays under 10,000 because I'm not doing it. But one of the things is that if you don't stay accountable to the black community or not just doing work in your own community, you can't really help or you can't really do this for black people because not all of them are going to. I always tell people, and I do DEI work all the time. I always tell people if you're coming to do this work to get a cookie, you might as well take the first cookie you see and leave because not every black person is going to be accepting of you, right?
And
Not
plus,
every black. Go ahead.
Sorry,
Go.
I get emotional real quick. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you go ahead. But
Go
I
ahead.
think so. We're not all going to accept you, and I say, and the thing is, I've heard. Listen, because my job. I mean, I'd like for my work to get to a place where I'm untying black people from white supremacy, and that's a different fight. But that's not a fight or a conversation I would even have with the two of you because it's not a place for the two of you.
I would leave if you tried.
Right. So that's the thing. So
Exactly.
for me, when I'm doing this work with white people, is because I'm at least opening myself up to have this conversation for you. Honestly, you need to be paying me. I'm not really doing it for free because people often think that this work is unstudied. It's just like you hear so many white people come to the work and say, "I'm so passionate about this because my so and so is black." Because my child is black. Okay, but what if your child grows up and hates you? What if your husband leaves you?
What
Are
if
you
that
still
relationship
going to be doing-
changes?
Right.
Thank you.
So it reminds me, and I'm going to go really cheesy here, in Sex and the City, the character of Charlotte wanted to become, she was dating a Jewish guy and then they broke up. And she was like, no, but I'm still going to be Jewish because I committed to this. Right. So if the relationship changes, how do you still be a part of this?
That's
right?
right.
Because not every black person, some black people are going to say, see your way over there, away from me. And because of the mistrust and the distrust, but what are you doing? So my I guess, and I know we're closing soon. One of the questions I want to ask you all is, what do you do to stay accountable to yourself or to the work in general? How do you stay accountable? Because you can do this work, and as we know, there are people who get book deals, who get TV shows, and then not all of them are just black people or just white people. There are some black people who do it as well. How do you stay accountable in this work? Not even to black people, but I think that to some degree, all white people doing race work need to be accountable to black people. Because if I say, hey, Jolly, this is definitely not the way to do it, that's the conversation we need to be having, and whether we're having it in front of people so other people can learn, or private because we have a relationship, right? Because that's a privy conversation. How do you all stay accountable? And then I say that because, and I point to you, Jolly, because me and Mel have these conversations as well. But how do you all, for yourself, stay accountable? How do you keep learning? How do you keep your privilege in check?
Me go first? Okay.
Yeah.
First, let me just say to what you were just going on before that question, because I 1,000% agree. Like, I'll be honest, I've never felt like, and here's the problem with social media and the internet is people have bastardized so many things that it's hard to say certain things without connotation being there. But what I'm about to say, I'm saying it from my heart of hearts, and I've said this way before anybody knew who I was. I've never felt like the black community needed help. I never felt like I didn't. Even when I was like, again, I was having this conversation way before social media. Matter of fact, when Facebook came around, 2010, I specifically remember when Facebook came around because my son was born that year, and I wanted nothing to do with social media. I was like, God, this social media. And then I would see people post, like I would hear about a Facebook post. I'm like, man, maybe I should get on Facebook. People have some conversation I want to be part of. So I got on Facebook, and all my posts were about race and politics. That was it. People are like, man, I'm gonna stop following you, Russell. Man, all you talk about is race and politics. Yeah, okay, then don't follow me, bro, because that's all I'm gonna talk about. I'm passionate about this. At no point during the last 22 years of me having this conversation did I ever feel like the black community needed my help. I legitimately, I mean this from my heart, and maybe it's because my brothers and sisters are black. They don't. My brothers and sisters are mixed, but they don't identify as white, obviously, because the world don't see them as white. The world sees them as black. And my brothers and sisters in my mind are super strong individuals. I see the black community as fucking strong as shit, and all the shit the black community has been through. And look what the fuck the black community has accomplished. I have never thought for a second, need my help, buddy. I've never thought that. I've always viewed what I'm doing as a fight with white America. I've viewed it that way. And so when people bring that up, what about black on black crime? I'm always confused. Like, how the fuck did you get there? How did what I'm saying get you to that conversation? Because I'm not talking about the black community. I'm talking about shit white people are doing. And so for me, how do I stay accountable? It's almost second nature for me at this point. Is I realize that I learned what I learned, and I realize I learned how I learned what I learned by listening to people that have different experiences than me. That's how I learned what I learned what I learned. And so I take the fight against white supremacy personal, but I don't take criticism personal. I actually take criticism extremely well in terms of I reflect. Somebody say, hey, Jolly man, you shouldn't do that. Really? And I'm like, what the fuck? Really? Like, why? Right? So that's like my thing. I've had people say to me before, like just met me, man, you racist? What made you think that? What led you to that conclusion? What did I do? That's my response. I want to hear your thought process. How'd you get there? I don't want to say I'm not a racist. I want to say, how'd you get there? What's your thought process? Because that's interesting. Did I do something to make you say that? That's interesting to me. Right? This is what we have to do. We have to put aside our personal ego and our personal, feelings, and understand that there are people who have different experiences than us. And if you're not willing to listen to people that have a different experience than you, then you're not doing any work. You're not in the work. There is no work, right? Because the way that I got in this work was listening to people who have different experiences than me. Because there was a whole nother world out there that I'd never seen or heard of before until I heard Malcolm say I didn't have a family name. Right? So you have to listen. And I like what you said, accountable to the black community. That's right. Because you know what? At the end of the day, no matter what fucking opinion I have, no matter what I say, preach, write in a book, whatever, the decisions that are made won't affect me. They'll affect marginalized communities. They'll affect Black America. They'll affect, Brown America. They'll affect the LGBTQIA plus community. These are affected communities by these conversations. So at the end of the day, if the opinion you have is not going to influence a change that will affect you directly, then be open for criticism. Because the other communities that are giving you that criticism, it fucking affects them directly. That matters. That means something. And so that's just how I view it, and it doesn't bother me. I love being wrong. Fuck it. I'm wrong today. Fuck yeah. Now I'm about to learn something. Let's go.
Right. I wish more people were like, I was wrong. Thank you for pointing that out to me. Because I tell people that, and I've had this conversation, Mel and I, as we put this 14-week course together last year. If somebody tells you that you are wrong, imagine how long it took them to get to that place.
Ooh.
Right?
Yeah. The courage to say it.
Right. Then have that conversation with you. And what they're doing is building a bridge to keep the relationship open. Because if you say something I don't like and you not worth my time, fuck him, fuck the conversation. I ain't having this conversation with him. Oh, I'm gonna stay away from Jolly because he say weird shit out his mouth. Watch him. And I'm gonna tell other people to watch you, so less and less black people gonna be around you. But if I say something to you, it's because I already value the relationship, or I value the potential in our relationship to continue, and how you respond is gonna be whether we can continue.
And you probably know it's gonna be received, right? And the receptiveness, right?
No, I mean sometimes yes, sometimes no. But then you know, I'm a person who has had to put my ego on the line, or not my ego. I've had to put myself on the line, to a boss. Because I'll tell a really short story because I know we're over. Well, not over, but I had a manager of mine put his hand. I was wearing a head wrap and he put his hands on my head. This is so nice, and I was like, wow. No. This is like, and at this point it's like the 7th time, right? And you know, but this is not my boss. It's not my boss's boss. It's not my boss's, but it's my boss's boss's boss. And I probably told this story already, even in a couple of weeks, but. A student, I was working at a university, and a student looked at me and she saw it. And I knew at that moment, if I let that pass,
you
and I was telling her it was acceptable and something she was going to have to accept. So I went into that boss's office and had a conversation with him. And for me, it was never about how it was going to come out, whether I was not going to be promoted in that job. Because to me, sometimes at certain jobs, listen, the only thing I'm leaving with is my paycheck and my integrity, and I'm good with that.
Right.
And I knew that. I knew that at that job, especially because of the environment when we were in. But when I left that conversation with that person, and hopefully they learned something, they took something on their way, I went back to her and said, I wanted you to know I had that conversation with him, because it was not okay and you shouldn't have to accept it. Because for a long time, Black people in the community would say that's just what you have to do. That's where respectability politics even comes from. But that'll be a conversation for a later day. Mel, how do you stay accountable in this work?
So, as you both were talking, I think I can identify 3 pretty big things that I try to make sure to check myself. First of all, am I, like it's been established, listening to people of color, but actually following the leadership of people of color? I think that's not something that I hear white people talk about often, because white people like to maintain control and the important voice in the room, but recognizing that I am not the expert as someone who hasn't been on the receiving end of this. So listening to and following the leadership of people of color, being self-reflective, like you said, Jolly, like, did I do something wrong? Thank you for educating me, and thank you for helping me learn, and let's let this moment make our relationship stronger instead of weaker. Yeah. And the third thing I would say is asking myself, what am I doing this for? What's really my motive? Am I doing it for a cookie? Am I doing it for the money? Am I doing it because someone's going to be like, oh, you're such a good person, you're an anti-racist, right? What are my motivations? Do I need to be a good person here? Right. Or am I doing it because it's the right thing to do? And I'll also add too, like, you asked the question about like, how has this impacted our relationships? How does this impact, like, in some ways, like, our identity? Like, we haven't quite touched on this, but racism is bad for white people. Racism is bad for white people.
We'll spend a whole episode on that, but yes, let's touch on it because it's true.
Right? It causes us to actively kill our own empathy and our own connection with our neighbors. That is not good for us emotionally, mentally, spiritually. It destroys white people from the inside too. It's good for nobody. So it's not just like this beneficial thing, like, oh, I'm going to be a good person, Dane from on high, to fix this problem. No, this thing is hurting me also, and it is for everybody's benefit. So I guess it's like keeping that in perspective.
I know we can't go too deeper into that because we'd be here another 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever.
Let's go. I gotta be here.
I'm here.
But one of the things is not, racism is killing white people emotionally, but it's a lie that's being told to you that you can't even reach, you can't even meet up to, you can't even reach.
It prevents your full circle of humanness to be. You can't make a full circle.
Yes.
And what I'll say too, I'll give you a good anecdote, because you gave an anecdote of what. I posted something remember when Congress passed the law for Juneteenth, right? To make Juneteenth a federal holiday. I posted on my Instagram, actually, not even on my TikTok at the time. I posted on my Instagram. I said, well, I guess this is a step in the right direction. Good job, Congress. And a bunch of people got in my comment section like, yo, Jolly, bro, I didn't expect that from you. You really think this shit matters? This is performative as fuck, bro. Are you serious about this? Now, I got two choices. What are my choices? Defend my actions and be like, hey, why would you say that? You know me, I'm jolly, right? Or stop and be like, what's he talking about? And I did. And I took the post down and I put a post up right behind it and I said, I read your comments and I thought about what you were saying. And that's a really good fucking point. This is performative. You know what? They're dropping cookie crumbs to make people happy. And I ate it. That's how rats get caught in traps, right? They eat the fucking crumb.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
And then I had a whole slew of motherfuckers, 3 times the comments that said, "Oh my god, bro! Like, good on you for fucking listening and changing." And it was such this big novel moment. I didn't think it was that big of a deal, but in the modern day and age, fuck, that's a big deal, right? To simply say, "Hey, that's a good point. I'm wrong." And I've done that multiple times.
I'm sure in your line of work, and we know, and you know, from being even present on social media, you've gotten invited to the cookout by so many people. I tell people, I'll tell people, like, I use that Blue Ivy calm down Beyonce hand, like, stop inviting people to the cookout. The cookout is canceled because y'all inviting these people and then you don't know who or what they're doing thereafter, right?
Well, you know what? I'm glad you said that because it's exactly what Mel just said, and that is, I call it the voting sticker. When you go vote, what happens? You get a sticker. Everybody knows you fucking voted. That is what white people see as an ally. I hate the term ally. Don't call me an ally. I fucking hate the term. I would rather just not have a title. What's my title is fuck white supremacy. That's my enemy. And so, but that's what they want. I got the title ally. So guess what? Not racist anymore, bro. You can't call me fucking racist.
I graduated.
Right? Yeah, I graduated. Look, I'm an ally, dude. Are you serious? I'm an ally. Me, bro. I'm an ally. And then, you know, it's this concept, being invited to the cookout, right? I've literally, and like you said, I've had, I guess if I was to count, probably in the neighborhood of 66,392 comments that said you're invited to the cookout. Understanding, again, having being deeply involved in the black community, I understand the respect that comes from that statement. Okay, I get it, and I'm honored that you would respect me to make this statement.
Yeah.
Never in my social media career have I replied to a comment that said you're invited to come cookout.
Listen,
here's why. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, if you did the Dougie, you'd be invited to the cookout. But we not.
That's the point. The point is, white people need to understand that racism isn't a light switch. Mm-hmm. Oh, I got invited to the cookout. Boop. Oh, I'm an ally. Boop. I'm not a racist anymore. Light switch off. And that's the problem in terms of the white community. In terms of white community, white people think that I did something and I got the approval of the black community and now I'm fucking set for life. And that's the problem. If you're doing this for the black community, that is inherently problematic.
Yeah.
Because that's the white savior complex, right? The black community, and again, I'm not saying this for kudos or cookie. Like you said, I love the analogy cookie. I'm not doing this for a cookie because I really do believe this. The black community is strong as fuck. Like, you have to be strong as fuck to go through what the fucking black communities come through. People say, oh, you're creating a victim mentality. You're kidding? No, these are fucking victors. I mean, that's quantifiable, mathematically quantifiable. I've never thought for a second that what I'm doing is for the black community. Never thought that because I never thought the black community needed me. So no matter if you're invited to the cookout or somebody called you an ally, this is work that must be done over and over every day. Constant self-accountability, constant listening, putting your ego aside, learning, growing. This deconstruction of hate and bigotry, and it's beyond racism. It's homophobia, it's transphobia, it's everything. This deconstruction of hate and bigotry is a long fucking process.
Yeah.
And if you're not ready for that process, then what people want is the process to end. Unfortunately, it doesn't.
It takes a long time to change.
It takes a long time.
Yeah.
Do you understand? I got Asian kids. They're literally half Korean. And I have to fucking, these days, not so much. I do really good these days. But there was a while where I would catch myself saying just fucking blatantly racist shit. Like jokes, right? It's just a joke about, I maybe make fun of an Asian accent, right? Or say something or, joking. And I was like, fuck's your problem, dude? You goddamn kids half Korean. Are you fucking stupid? Like, this is the conversation I'm having with myself because it's growing, bro. It's not turned off overnight.
Yeah.
If there was one message, if you said to me, hey, you're dead tomorrow you're dead. So what one message do you want to leave to white America? And that's my message. That to me, I think, is the most important message, is that racism, hate, bigotry, it's a spectrum. And you need to figure out where you are on that spectrum. Before we started, Mel, you had a great little.
Yeah, want me to show it? Okay, so
Yeah,
this is
that's a
like
good one. There you go.
it's like a half circle. If you're listening, half circle, it goes from red to yellow to green, right? So across of it says,
I love
on
that.
on the far side, we've got, white supremacy. You think of like people wearing white hoods, right?
Yep.
You get white voyeurism, like people who like to like look at people of color and just like gawk and treat them like other, right? Then you get white privilege, people who don't recognize, the kinds of privilege that society affords you without question. Then you've got white benefit, yeah. Then white confessional. Oh, I'm white. I'm going to confess all my sins as a white person so you can make me feel good about myself. Then we've got white critical, so we're starting to get some of the territory we've been today. Like we're going to criticize these white norms, and how whiteness acts like a blanket. Then we've got white traitor, like actually calling out the bullshit, right? Like, and then on the very far side of the spectrum, you have white abolition, which if you see that little white
John
needle,
Brown.
Abolitionist.
Yeah, white abolitionist. You see that little white needle? It's almost to the edge, right? So we're not trying to get rid of white people, but we're trying to understand that whiteness as a cover for white supremacy is unacceptable and is hurting us.
I mean, one of the things, and I'll kind of jump in there too and say that people don't realize when there was a Black Panthers, there was also a White Panthers. So it's not.
I didn't know that.
Yes,
there was a White Panthers.
Alive. And when I first heard White Panthers,
God.
I was like, does that sound like the red KKK? No, they were an abolitionist group within white people, and all of them are still alive. And that's the thing. There have always been white people in this fight. But now people are doing it either for the wrong reasons and this is the thing. As we talked a little bit about earlier with white supremacy, if you are fighting against it, right? Like because fighting against it is what you need to do, then you don't have to. You will start to feel better about yourself anyway, because you'll be like, you can start to inherently feel like a good person instead of just saying it out loud. Like, I'm a good person. You can say that because, Black people got a lot of sayings, and one of them is good intentions pave the way to hell, right? But if you talk about you have to be able to engage with that. And I want people to I don't want, and when I'm doing this work, I'm doing it not that I want white people to feel bad about themselves or whatever. But I'm also not here to make you feel good about yourself. Like, I'm just here, and if I can help you learn, then great. But we have to understand that, like, white supremacy is killing you. That is the, we can get into that for real, but that's the deep mental part of it, is that if we stay fighting, poor Black, poor white, then the 1% will win. So that's why it makes it, if you fight against me and the Black person, and I don't want, Black people are all on welfare, these welfare queens, blah 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 blah, then when they say we should give free healthcare to everyone, you're gonna say no, and then a bunch of white people gonna die too. Like, and then it's gonna, like, when I think about the white beauty standard. How many white women don't fit the white beauty standard?
Right.
How many? Right. Most of them.
Be better to just do away with it, right? Like, let's just fucking do away with it.
But it's a standard that white people white women will literally starve themselves to death to be a part of, but they don't fit it at all. Like, do you have straight blonde hair? Do you have blue eyes? Do you have this body? Listen, there were studies done, and I used to do this when I was in college. We had to do all of these studies that Black women, and until the advent of social media the way it exists today, Black people had a lot lower rates of having anorexia, bulimia, and different nervosas because we weren't a part of the American beauty standard, so it wasn't no try. There was no try, and we had one that was completely outside of that. Right. Our beauty standard was completely outside. I never thought I was gonna look like a Christy Brinkley. Like, that's not gonna happen over here. So I wasn't going to start starving myself to be a part of that. It has changed a little bit now with that. But I just say that to say, like, and I know I want to wrap up, but I want to say, like, I think thinking about being accountable and what you do to stay in the work is really important, because as you continue, you have to self-sustain somehow, right? And I always tell people, like, there need to be for this work to exist, there needs to be jollies. There need to be people who are angry about it, but there also need to be people like Mel who are more, calm in conversation and more happy-go-lucky and are not necessarily so angry, because everybody who meets Jolly won't learn from him, but everybody who meets Mel won't learn from you. So we need to have that balance, and I think that that's important. But I think
everybody has a role in the fight, right? Like,
absolutely.
That's the thing. And that, to your previous point, I'm gonna say this before I forget, because you were making a good point. The problem I see, especially with the advent of social media, especially with the events of last year and the murder of George Floyd, is there's a lot of white people who did wake up and say, "God damn, racism is real. I didn't realize it." And here's the problem. You know how when you start a new job, you're like, "Fuck yeah, I'm ready to go. I want to do this new job." But then you've been working there for a year. It's like, okay, this job kind of sucks. 2 years, like, fuck this job, right?
It's still a job.
Yeah, exactly. There's always that new higher energy. I call it the new higher energy when white people first wake up. They have that new higher energy.
Yeah. It's like a honeymoon period. Yeah.
Yes. And white people come in like, I'm fucking hard charging, I'm ready to go. And they speak over Black America. They speak for Black America. And then when they get checked on, they speak at Black America, right? And so that's what I want white people to really understand is, listen, Mel, let's say I'm your friend. I got a key to your house and you're at work and I know you've had a hard week. And I secretly go to your house and use my key that you've given me because you trust me with that. And I clean your house up spick and span before you get home. And then when you come home, what would I naturally as a human being expect? Probably a positive reaction, maybe a phone call. I can't believe you did this for me. That's so thoughtful. Thank you. You're an amazing human being. That's the problem. White America's looking for that phone call because they're doing it. They think that they're cleaning Black America's house up for them. Yeah. And that's what I want white America to understand. When you wake up and understand there's racism, please understand that the racism was started by white America, perpetrated by white America, perpetuated by white America, and dedicated by white America. Yeah. So when you wake up and realize racism is real, stop trying to clean Black America's house up and realize the work is cleaning white America's house up, and you'll stop looking for that pat on the back, and you won't feel so bad when you get checked.
And that's the thing, too. That is so well said. And that's the thing, too, that when you first start doing this work, a lot of times you'll get a lot of cookies. But then when you really start doing the work you're gonna get called a grifter, you're gonna get called names, you're gonna get called a race traitor, like you're gonna take some hits, and you can't get your feelings hurt and just run for the hills because people are mean to you, because you're actually starting to make sense and push some buttons that people don't want you to push.
But those are the white buttons. You might stop getting cookies from Black people. Then you got to go find a new audience and a bigger audience and more. And if
you're pushing the buttons of Black people, I think you need to stop. You need to stop and sit down and listen. Right, I'm talking about like specifically making white people mad.
White people, but you may not be getting as many cookies in the beginning because now you're doing the work and you're deep entrenched in the work. I don't get cookies for this work, so if somebody giving you cookies, bitch, give me half. Like I tell people this all the time. Like when I talk about race, and I love having partners in this work, co-conspirators. I have co-conspirators in all the work, and they look all very, very different, right? And sometimes I use them. And I'll say this, I've used Mel as well. Hey, Mel, I need you to come in and be a partner in this work because they're going to listen to you different than they listen to me.
You say partner, I say token white person, and I'm fine with it. I understand.
You can be my token white person. And I think, I just think that's the overarching is that you have to do this. And then let's give, because people love a good takeaway. The takeaway is you have to do this work in whatever way it fits for you, that feels the most natural for you in whatever area you sit in. So if you are an artist, paint about it. If you are a singer, sing about it. If you are, because not everybody can be.
If you're an educator, educate about it.
Right, exactly. Right.
I talk a lot about that because people say like, oh, Jolly's in the streets, and I am. I protest a lot. I go to a lot of protests. I get involved a lot. And, what have you done? And I always check them. I appreciate you giving me props, but don't use my work to put down the work of somebody else. What people need to understand in this age of social media, there's work to be done on social media. There's a lot of work to be done on social media without ever stepping foot in the street. Education, checking your own people, putting them in check. Yo, that's some racist shit you're doing right there, right? And so what I always say is if you do more than me in this fight, I respect you for it. If you do less than me in this fight, I respect you for it. If you do exactly what I do in this fight, I respect you for it. But God damn it, do something in this fight. Find where you fit in and just do something. Stop having the activism Olympics. Stop trying to figure out who's doing more and who's doing what. And oh yeah, you talk about it. Listen, walking the walk means staying true to your word. Means you're not looking for that cookie. You're not looking for that pat on the back. You're really about this work. Because you're right. You're right. When you first start, you get a lot of cookies. Now, because of the size of my platform, there are tons of people in my comment section all the time. Oh, Jolly, I love you. Right? And that's great and all. But I promise you, on everything I love in this world, you can take my social media platform from me tomorrow and erase them all. And I'm still going to do this work because that's not what I'm in it for. And so for the takeaway, literally for me and white America, is find your fucking place in this fight. What's your strength? What's your fucking, what do you do? And just do it. Stay true who you are. Fight white supremacy. Don't help Black America fight white supremacy. That will help everybody. And you'll get a lot further in it. So.
And please, for the love of God, get more angry about racism existing than about being called a racist. Please, for the love of God, just think about it real hard.
Yeah. So we want to say thank you for coming and having this conversation
thank you for having me.
With us. Absolutely. You know where to find Jolly, because if you know where to find us, then you definitely know where to find them. We're all on TikTok. We're all on Instagram. And this is live streamed to Facebook. We'll take the question. We have some audience questions. We'll get them. We'll kick them back to next week. We really just want to say thank you for having this conversation with us and getting and doing this work. I'm not going to thank y'all for the work. I'm going to say keep doing it. That's keep doing it, man. This conversation.
Hey, and sorry for rambling. I know I rambled.
No, it's
listen,
awesome.
That's what we
thank
came
you
for.
so much.
I really wanted to be able to have this conversation without and believe it or not, we have an outline for the show and we got to everything and more on it. So thank you so much.
Well, every time people tell me we got an hour-long show, I'm like, God, why do I get invited to hour-long shows, bro? Like next week it's 2 weeks from now. I'm on NBC Radio. Has me coming on their show.
Oh, sweet.
And yeah, which is cool because it's NBC Radio. Woo! He was like, it's an hour-long show. I was like, bro, you better have some preset questions and make me shut up because an hour. That's you know what I mean.
You would
that's
be
tough.
surprised. I have gotten, and I do this professionally as well. I have gotten, hey, we have 30 minutes to talk about racism.
I can't even tell you a story in 30 minutes, bro.
Right, in an audience of 1,500.
God, in 30 minutes? What are you gonna tell them in 30 minutes? Your name?
So when I do these, I definitely understand the parameters. So thank you for having this conversation with us. You can catch us back here next Tuesday at 8, and this will be posted everywhere. So if you couldn't catch us right, well, some of y'all have us in your pocket because we are on Apple Podcasts, but you can catch us here next Tuesday as well. Thank you. Have a good night, and we'll talk to you all soon.
All power to the people.
Cheers.
All right, bye-bye.